everyone, and welcome to Velocity Online. We're so glad you're joining us today. I'm standing out in front of the Kitty Company at our Lyndhurst campus, and while we can't go inside and meet in person just yet, we are so excited for that day to come. We miss you all so much, whether you're from Lyndhurst or from Mentor. If you're joining us for the first time, we would love to connect with you. Do us a favor and go to our website at velocitycleveland.org/connect and fill out the form. We're not going to send you a bunch of spam or flood your inbox. We just want to send you a welcome email and keep you informed about the great things that Velocity has going on throughout the year. Also on our website, you can fill out prayer request forms. These go directly to our staff who then prays for you throughout the week. And you can also give on our website at velocitycleveland.org/give. Because of your continued generosity, we can keep these online services going, but we've also been able to help so many people in our church and our community. A little later on in the service, we're going to be doing communion as well. And if you're not familiar with it, communion is just a time when we take two symbolic items and use them to remember Jesus' death on the cross. We'll take a sip of juice and a bite of bread, but anything you have on hand will work. Now is a great time to grab whatever items you plan to use. We have a few more announcements for you after the message, so please stay tuned. But for now, we hope you enjoy the service.
In the presence of my enemies, and I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief, and I raise a hallelujah, and my weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah, and heaven comes to fight for me. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You're gonna hear my praises roar up from the ashes. Hope will arise. Inside of me, and I raise a hallelujah, and I will watch the darkness flee. Oh, and I raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery. And I raise a hallelujah. Fear you lost your hold on me. Oh, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You're gonna hear my praises roar up from the ashes. Hope will arise. Death is defeated. The King is alive. Sing a little louder. 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 In the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder. Louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. fight for me. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You're gonna hear my praises roar. And up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. And I raise a hallelujah. And I raise a hallelujah. Oh, I raise a hallelujah. And I raise a hallelujah. Oh, yeah.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I once was a slave to sin. Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. The sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. Oh, I was a slave to sin. Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. The sun sets free, oh, is free in me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
I have a dream. One day, All right, good morning. I'd like to welcome you to Velocity Online. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, if you do us a favor and check in, that would be amazing. Well, as some of you may remember, last week we started a brand new sermon series that we called A Different Perspective. And the reason I wanted to do this series is because if there was ever a time in history when we as followers of Jesus need to view the world differently, it's now. Over the past few months, our world has been turned completely upside down. We've seen businesses close, people forced to shelter in place, and this pandemic has brought many people into financial ruin. But over the past few weeks, there have been a variety of racial onslaughts that have devastated our nation. On February 23rd, Ahmaud Arbery was jogging through Brunswick, Georgia, when he was shot by a man who suspected him of being a criminal. Now, the man who shot him was not a policeman. He was nothing more than a racist white guy who profiled an innocent man because of the color of his skin. And then on May 25th, George Floyd was arrested for buying cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. A few minutes later, the police showed up and they arrested him. But while he was lying on the ground, face down in handcuffs, one of those officers kept his knee on George Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes, and he died as a result of improper police procedure. The ramifications of his death have been felt around the world. Cities all across the country, in fact, all around the world, have held protests demanding that things change, and some of those protests turned into riots, looting, and violence. And I want to be very honest with you about this. As I have watched all of these events unfold, I've gotten very angry. In fact, about a week and a half ago, I was out in the back part of my house and I was mowing my grass. And I was thinking about how Ahmaud Arbery died. And there was one thought that kept racing through my mind. And my thought was, what if this had been Jamil Sanders? I mean, Jamil's my friend. He's fit. What if one day he just decided to lace up his shoes and go for a run and he was shot for no other reason than the color of his skin? I mean, what would I say to his wife? What would I say to his 5 children? Would I look at them and go, well, you know, there's just some places people with that color of skin shouldn't run. And that's not true. And the more I thought about this, the angrier I got. And because so many of us are feeling that way, I thought it would be wise to look at what the Bible has to say about how we should be responding. I mean, what do we do when racism rears its ugly head? What do we do when somebody loses a life for no reason at all? Because if our goal as disciples is to do everything we can to be just like Jesus, the question we have to ask is, how did Jesus respond to people from different nationalities? How did he respond to people who looked a little bit different than him? Well, the most obvious example was Jesus' interaction with the Samaritan woman. Because back in the first century, the Jewish people hated Samaritans. And do you know why they hated them? Because at one point in Israel's history, some Jewish men married some Assyrian women. Like, of all the tragedies in the world, 2 different nationalities got married. But these interracial couples, these 2 groups of people, became known as Samaritans, and the Jewish people despised them. They couldn't stand these people. In fact, they hated them so much. They called them dogs and half-breeds, and they thought so little of this group of people that when they were going from Galilee to Judea, or Judea up to Galilee, they wouldn't go through Samaria. They would go all the way around it. And you know why? It's because we don't even want to go into their country. It's those people. We don't even want to be around them. But that's not what Jesus did. Look at what the Bible says in John chapter 4, verse 4. It says, now Jesus had gone through Samaria And now that you understand the history, every light in the dashboard of your brain should be blinking, because when Jesus entered Samaria, he was breaking every cultural and societal norm. No Jewish person would have ever done that, but Jesus did. Jesus didn't care about who married who, what nationality were, and he didn't care about the color of their skin. He cared about people. So he went right through the middle of Samaria. But Scripture tells us that when they get to the little village of Sychar, the disciples go into town to buy food, but Jesus didn't go. What he did was he sat down by a well in order to rest. And I want you to see what happens in verse 7. It says, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Now, if verse 4 didn't melt your mind, this verse should. Because not only did Jesus strike up a conversation with a Samaritan, he started talking to a woman. And nobody would have ever done that. No man would ever talk to a woman, because at this time in history, women were considered a little bit higher than cattle. They were just property. They were nothing more than second-class citizens. But that's not what Jesus thought. His love was so much bigger than gender, and it was so much bigger than nationality, that he breaks every social norm and he strikes up a conversation with this Samaritan woman. And when he starts talking to her, this lady is completely dumbfounded. She can't believe that a man, let alone a Jewish man, would ever talk to her. That's why verse 9 says this. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How could you ask me for a drink?" This lady's in total shock. She can't believe this is happening. She was like, look, not only am I from a nationality of people that Jews hate, I'm a woman. But that's not the way that Jesus viewed her. His love for people superseded race and color and gender and nationality. And these two people, Jesus and this Samaritan woman, go on to have a very endearing conversation. But toward the end of their discussion, the disciples come back from town. And I want you to see what happens when the disciples come back. Look at what the Bible says in verse 24. It says, just then, his disciples returned, and they were surprised to find Jesus talking to a woman. And you know why they were surprised? Because it didn't happen. This is like saying, hey, on my way to work today, I saw 2 unicorns. No, you didn't. This was something that never, ever happened. The disciples were shocked. They see Jesus talking to this woman, and they can't believe it. But the next sentence says this, but no one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking to her? In other words, the Bible says the disciples didn't say to this lady, what do you want? And they didn't look at Jesus and say, why are you talking to her? And I want you to pay close attention to what John wrote there, because he was writing something very specific. He was writing the mindset that the disciples had. Why would anyone talk to a woman? And let alone, why would anybody talk to a Samaritan? But I want you to see what happens when the conversation between Jesus and the Samaritan lady comes to an end. Look at what the Bible says in verse 28. It says, then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town, which begs the question, why did she do that? This lady came out of the village of Sychar in order to go to the well to get some water to drink. So why did she leave it there? Well, the reason she left her jar and went back into town is because she had never met anyone who treated her with more love and grace and compassion than Jesus. The Bible says, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town and said to the people, come, you're never going to believe this. She said, come and meet the man who told me everything I ever did. She said, look, I want you to come. You guys are never going to believe this. I just met the most loving and the most gracious person. He's kind of religious. He calls himself a rabbi, but I have never met anyone like him. And verse 40 says, so the Samaritans came to Jesus. They urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days, which should make your mind go, because not only did Jesus enter a country that everybody else avoided, and not only did he engage in conversation with a group of people who were hated by every Jewish person, he broke gender lines and spoke to a woman, and then he took it a step further. He spent an enormous amount of time with these people, showing and teaching them the truth about God's love. And the last verse in that section says this, and because of his words, many more of them became believers. You see, the result of Jesus crossing gender and racial lines was reconciliation. The result was unity in spite of their differences. And folks, I want you to know, that is the mindset of the leadership here at Velocity Church. Because from day one, I wanted Velocity to be a place where any person of any gender and any color and any nationality could come and they could understand the truth about God's love. That is who we are as a church, and that is what I have been praying for in our country. Now, over the past few weeks, I have gotten hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds of phone calls from so many of you asking me, Scott, what should we do? I mean, how should I respond? And Scott, how should I feel about the police who did this? Because I'm so angry, I'm so upset, and I just don't know what to do. Well, in order to answer some of those questions, I actually did something a little bit different today. This morning, I asked a very good friend of mine to be here with us to discuss some of the most heated issues surrounding this topic. His name is John Willard. John has been on the Lyndhurst Police Department for over 25 years. He's a husband, father, and a really great guy. So would you do me a favor and virtually welcome my really good friend, John Willard. So John, first off, thanks so much for being here. And I know you really well. I met you all the way back in 2009, if you can believe that.
Yes.
We did some skateboard competitions and 3-on-3 basketball stuff together. And I know a lot about you, but everybody watching may not know you as well. So why don't you take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about you and how you entered law enforcement.
Okay. My name is Jonathan Willard. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years now. I started out in Lima, Ohio, which is kind of far from Cleveland, and I did 5 years there. And I returned back to the Cleveland area because a family member, my father, was ill. So I wanted to be close to family, be supportive of family. So I moved back, and I've been with the Lyndhurst Police Department for 20 years now. I'm originally from the Cleveland area, grew up in the Glenville neighborhood. And from there, I moved on, started in the military to really reinforce what I wanted to do in life. And it didn't take long, and I realized law enforcement was really going to be the avenue that I wanted to take. So it was at a young age, looking out and seeing the cruisers go by and seeing officers go by and wondering, I wonder what that's like. I wonder what it feels like to be a part of a community and be that helpful, protective person. And it spurred me on until now. So it's been great.
That's great. So John, one of the things that you told me is when you started your career in Lima, you were a part of an incident with a high-speed chase that turned out really super peculiar. Why don't you take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about that?
Okay. Lima's an interesting place because you have a history of police in the community, minority community, and not getting along, and accusations of police brutality and just things that would happen or was accused to have happened. And on that particular night, we were in a pursuit, and I wasn't the lead vehicle, but the suspect vehicle crashed. And the lead vehicle, he was taking care of the driver, and I took care of the passenger. In the process of handcuffing him, he turned around and he looked at me, and he was like, "Oh, hey, no problem, thank you. I'm glad it's you." Which, of course, took me by surprise because what do you mean? I'm putting you in handcuffs. You're getting ready to go to jail. And he's like, no, I'm glad it's you because at least I know I'll make it to the police department safely. You're not going to do nothing to me. So that spurred on a lot of thought and a lot of effort to make sure that people were treated fairly. People were treated equally. And it all started within the police department on everybody understanding that everybody that you deal with are going to view all police officers on that one encounter. Mm-hmm. So you just start spreading the message and spreading it and just trying to be helpful and show people, I'm just trying to be helpful. Mm-hmm. If I stop you because you're on the side of the road, I'm just trying to be helpful to make sure that you don't need help. If I see you and it's any incident, for me, it's more of a helpful nature than a harmful nature. So it was pretty important in forming how I became as an officer because I didn't want people to fear me just because of the job we were doing.
Mm. Now, one of the things that you told me that I really, it just meant a lot to me is you said that you're able to see the world through a really different set of lenses. Like, because we're doing a sermon series right now called A Different Perspective. And the reason that I love your perspective is you said that you're able to see the world through the lenses of a husband, a father, a minority, but also through the lens of being an officer. Do me a favor and explain that a little bit about what you told me to everybody.
It's interesting every day because you wake up and if you turn on the news, you see what's going on in society. And if you see current situation, the protest and the death of Mr. Floyd, I look at it in a lot of different lenses because as a man, as a minority male, it could be me. I look at it as a police officer. What training, what was trying to be achieved from what took place that particular day. But I also look at it as a father because nobody wants to see their child go through anything like that and experience anything like that for any reason. So you keep going down a list of looking at it through everybody else's lenses, and then it helps to give you a perspective on how the next person may feel. Mm. Speaking to you, trying to look through it through your lenses on trying to help guide and direct young people in something that they saw that was an injustice. Mm. So it's a matter of working with everybody in every community and every lens to try to make sure, because ultimately at the end of the day, I am also a police officer. Mm-hmm. And I'm being asked and I'm being viewed and I'm being questioned on why didn't, how could this? And you have to sit down and answer those questions and look through everybody's lens because you'll make the wrong assumption. And unfortunately, everybody needs to be taken on the same level. Right. So it's going to affect everybody differently. And some people it may not affect, and those that it may not affect, you have to look at it through the lens of other people to be able to start to understand how it could affect that person. Not as a group, but just that person, because you don't know what they've experienced. You don't know what experiences they're going through at that time. So a lot comes into play, and a lot of it comes back to, and as a police officer, I have to deal with each lens of each person that I may come in contact with that day. Mm.
And one of the things that I thought, and to be honest, I had never thought about this until you said this, is some people would assume that because you're a police officer, that you would never get profiled. Like, well, he's a policeman, he has no idea what it's like to be profiled, but you told me that's not true. That's not true
not
at all.
Not at all. I mean, I'm still seen as a male, as a black male, as a minority, and every trip that we go on, it's not uncommon for me to get pulled aside, even though I have my badge and my ID and all my credentials, and asked to go into the back room for an additional search. For a long time, for me, because again, I'm looking at it through various lenses, even as a customer, as a passenger, I'm thankful that they're taking the time to check people. Mm-hmm. I never could understand why they would take the time to check me. But as long as they're checking people, that's fine. But it also put in perspective for me, no matter what I do, whatever position I may hold, people still see through their own lens who they perceive to be a threat or would be a threat. And unfortunately, I fit the profile.
Mm. And so I know the story, but when you told me specifically what happened to you and your wife the last time you were flying, mm-hmm. Do me a favor and tell people that story, because people are like, well, that's kind of a, He didn't really answer. I don't really know. That's actually
Okay.
not true. Tell them,
Okay.
because I really want them to hear, like, hey, here's the truth.
Okay, so I always try to be one of the last on the plane to minimize the cramping and sitting on a squished plane. So as most people boarded, almost everybody boarded. My wife scanned her ticket. She got the green light. She was starting to go down the gangway. And my ticket, I got the red X. We were coming back from Mexico or some great vacation. And I had already went through the additional screening and thought that, went through customs, everything was good. And the flight attendant kept telling me, well, you can't board until you get searched by TSA. So, okay, that's no problem. My wife is trying to come back saying, what is going on? I'm not getting on this plane. However, her ticket had been scanned. She had to proceed on. And while we were waiting on the TSA to arrive, I could hear them saying, the plane is ready to go. Let's move this plane. And the agent arrived, and that was when I realized that we were at the end of a concourse. So it's just a big circle, all the gates around it. And the TSA agent, doing his job, walked up and said, I'm sorry it took me so long, but I need to do this, and I apologize because there's no place we can go. It's okay with me because I want to get on a plane and get home and finish my vacation, until I turned around and for procedures, spread my arms and spread my legs, and then I looked in front of me, and all I seen was a lot of passengers coming toward us, looking at me like, what did he do to be standing there spread eagle in the middle of the waiting area to get on his plane? Mm-hmm. And it puts a lot of things in perspective, because now I could see through the lens of somebody that's being asked to do something that they may feel is not right. Mm-hmm. I've already went through security. Why are you asking me to do this again? And everybody have to step back and, either through communication, and sometimes it's policy and procedure, explain to a person so that they can understand that you're just doing your job, and because of whatever procedure that was maybe not correct, this is what happens sometimes. Mm. Do I feel that it was profiling me as a person? No, because I have a badge and my credentials. But it can happen to anybody at any time, no matter what they look like. But if you're on the receiving end of it, more often than not, you can feel that it's done on purpose, which leads to traffic stops as a police officer. Unfortunately or fortunately, people think we see exactly who we're pulling over, but unfortunately all we see is a car that was speeding or ran a red light, and we can't see the occupants of the car. But that also can be perceived by some. They keep stopping me because of what they see, because of the color of my skin. Oftentimes it's not, because we don't know until we walk up and see who it is. Mm-hmm. So it can go both ways.
Yeah. So, as you know, on May 25th, George Floyd was accused of buying a pack of cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. A few minutes later, police show up and handcuff him on the ground, and this officer literally puts his knee on the back of this guy's neck and literally he takes the man's life. Yeah. When you see something like that as an officer, how does that make you feel?
I think I can speak for most officers. It makes us feel disheartened. It angers us, because the profession that we work so hard to stand above and to be counted on and respected in is all taken away by one officer and one incident. My coworkers and myself, we talk about it. We see it through all the different lenses, but more importantly, we see it through a police officer's lens. And what we see, we didn't like. We didn't like it then. We wouldn't like it. And it takes a group of people that is standing for justice to either intervene at that time and definitely announce that they stand against it, with no question, with no hesitation. With all the protests going on, those officers standing in that line and taking the abuse and taking all that they're taking in an attempt to protect property and what somebody's worked so hard for, they also know and agree that it was wrong. They'll never agree that it was right for any reason. So it's hard to let the public know when they've seen an officer. But as we grow up, talk about the apples in a bushel. There's always one bad apple in every bushel. You name a profession, and there's been a story that shows that that person did not take that profession the same way that everybody else did. So we also have to understand that one person in any profession is not defining that whole profession or the individuals within that profession.
Right. So, John, what would you say, because one of the things that have like, because I've been, the past, since May 25th, I've been inundated with phone calls from people who are like, Scott, I am so mad. I'm mad. I'm mad at the police. I'm mad at the situation. I'm mad at how we're looking at people because of the color of their skin. I'm just angry over what happened. What would you say to the people specifically who were really, really angry at the police department in this over the George Floyd situation? What would you say?
I would say the biggest thing is you have to look at yourself and know your involvement within your city, within your police department, and just getting to know. Because the officers at every department are all human. They all want to go home to their family. They all prayerfully want their parents to see them return home. Their loved ones, they want to see this, but people have to realize we're all people. And we don't know what your worst day is when we come in contact with you. And unfortunately, the same thing applies. You don't know what we might have just left, what we had to deal with, and the communication may not be correct. Mm-hmm. But the anger toward the people that's out there trying to help you. Mm-hmm. And I've had conversations with people and say, but they gave me a speeding ticket. You haven't seen the results of what happens in an accident which was caused by speed.
Right.
That simple right turn on red. You don't know how many people that I've seen and had to help that was injured because a car turned right on red. So people don't like to feel that we're here to help people even when they don't want to help themselves. We're all humans. You have a right, but we also want to, if you don't want to help yourself, we want to help the next motorist. We want to help the next person. And in every profession, bad things happen. And you can't make up for it. You can't deny it. You have to talk about it. You have to accept it. You have to try to figure out how to avoid it in the future. And with the young people, the young kids now watching this on TV, they have to be guided with the correct anger, or they're going to grow up with the wrong type of anger toward the wrong people. I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's huge. So, as you mentioned this earlier, one of the things that we've both seen over the past week and a half is there have been protests, not just in America, but around the world now over the outrage of what happened to George Floyd. I mean, Britain, Italy, Mexico, countries all around the world are they're super frustrated. And one of the things that people have asked me is Scott, what does the Bible say about protesting? Well, the Bible doesn't say that protesting is a sin or protesting is wrong. Protests go out of what God would want for your life when they turn to rioting, looting, and violence, right? That's when the scripture okay, look, it's not wrong to protest. It's not wrong to say, look, this isn't right. We're going to peacefully demonstrate and say, look, we stand against this, but we're not hurting anybody. Do me a favor. Talk a little bit about kind of that world of what does protest look like that you'd say this is a good thing?
I think we would all agree that protests have definitely had positive effects on our culture, our future, our history. It's been very positive, and unfortunately, it can also be very deadly and very detrimental to the cause. So I, of course, get asked also, should I or shouldn't I? And I encourage people, it's in your heart, it's in you. If you want to go out and peacefully protest, that's great. But you have to be aware of your surroundings. And I've been amazed by some of the different locations that you can see the community and the police department interaction in their relationship with the police department wanting to help people protest peacefully. And they've also got the same respect because some of the community members have located those that wanted to loot and to destroy property, and quickly attempted to either stop them or notify the officials of where they were and who they were. Because if you work together, everybody should be able to be allowed to protest peacefully. And the police department, being members of your community, being members of a community, also probably feel strongly about the same issues. But we have a job to do, so we have to do our part. And with help from the community and the community leaders and just the community members, it can be peaceful. But you have to work together, not just at the time, but hopefully before that, to know who you can talk to know how to make a change and who's going to be with you to make that change.
Yeah. Because one of the things that has really bothered me about some of the protests is we have people who I know very well who own businesses, and they're just starting to open businesses coming out of the coronavirus, and now they can't. Right. Because some of these protests have really just turned upside down, and they don't realize, like, man, you are really, you're hurting so many people and families, and I think that's where it can get really, really confusing
and
right now.
And people have to look at the lenses and be out there working together to hopefully protest and have voices heard, but to do it in such a way so you don't destroy somebody's property or livelihood.
Right. So, John, let me ask you one more question. We have a lot of people who come to Velocity Church, a lot of people who watch this online, but what's the one thing that you would say? Like, if you could say, okay, here's the one thing that I would say to anybody who's watching who's not a minority. You're not Hispanic, you're not Asian, you're not African American, you're not Latino, you're not a minority. But what you're seeing around the world is the hurt that so many minorities have gone, like, just emotionally. Like, do you understand? What's one thing that you would say to everybody who's watching today who's not a minority? Like, please understand this. What would you say?
I think the biggest thing is, please understand that those out there that do feel and see injustices isn't made up. We cannot want to believe a lot of things, but we have to, at some point, understand that it is and continues to go on. People aren't crying wolf. People are really going through some very hard times and very systematic racism issues. It depends where you live, what services you have. It depends where you live or what zip code you have, what you're entitled to or not entitled to. It really does live in our society today. It does. And if you can't see through somebody else's lens, then you'll never understand what they're going through. You'll never live it. I could never see life through your lens as a pastor being on the pulpit. I couldn't. I try to imagine it, you standing there and looking out and having that audience that want to hear and want to know which way is really the right way to go. People can't look through, you can't look through my lenses and say, I don't know what it's like to walk up to a car and not know what to expect. But we have to believe, we have to trust, we have to try to open our eyes and open our minds and be open about it and be willing to talk about it on all fronts, no matter who it is, no matter what your position is. I hear people say it all the time, we're all in this together. And I totally agree. We are all in this together, but the difference is we're all in different boats. Yeah. And this boat might be going pretty smooth and this boat might be pretty rocky, but we are in this all together. But we have to remember we're in different boats through this storm. And everybody's going to be affected, but everybody's affected in a different way. And if you'll be able to look across the pond and see things are going pretty smooth over here, but over there it is pretty bad. How can we help? What can we do to be a part of being a solution to this whole mess that we're in, instead of just staying on the one side and looking across and not making any effort? We all have to help. We all have to do our part. Even if it isn't our part, we all have to attempt to do a little bit more for each other. Not just for one, but for each other, for everybody.
That's great. John, thanks for being here. I mean that. I love you to death. I'm so thankful.
I'm actually thankful because, like you said, when we met, and hope you guys are still, when we met, it was, hey, can you go work a side job, something about a basketball tournament? I said, of course. Had no idea who Pastor Scott was, had no idea who the Velocity Church was, but I went out and I remember standing and talking, saying, this is wonderful. I think this is great. In our interaction and the lack of attendance, unfortunately, no fault of your own, I said, I will do anything that I can to help Pastor Scott and Velocity Church in any way, in any time, in any fashion, because of the efforts that you guys do continue to make with reaching out to the community. All people in the community, all people that need, all people that you guys can help, it's there. So this community, this entire community, and a lot of people should be able to learn from that. Churches should be able to learn from that. Pastors should be able to learn from you on how to go out and help the community. That's most important, and that's God sent, and it was a pleasure to work with you through this entire time and to be here, because it changed a lot about people within this community knowing there's people that care. There's people that's not just doing what they can. There's people that's doing more to help everybody within this community to make it a stronger, healthier, religious community. So from me to you guys, you and everybody else, we can't thank you as a community enough for what you're doing to help change this community and unite this community.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Hey, let's for those of you who don't know, John is actually retiring next week.
Yes.
This is his last couple days with us, but I want to pray, take a minute. I want to pray for you. I want to pray for our country and for all this going on, but let's just take a minute. Let me pray for you. So God, first off, thanks for John and just for his heart, because the one thing that, and I remember that standing over at Brainerd having this conversation that you just said, and he's been true to his word, because the one person who's always been there to help and serve right alongside us has been him. And God, my prayer for John specifically is, now that he's kind of hanging up, the cuffs and the badge, and he's moving on to something else, God, my prayer is that he could make the kind of impact in Arizona that he's made here, that he really could be a huge influence to the life of young people and people in the community, because there's stuff that John's done that he doesn't even know that people know, that they hear about, the people he stopped to check on, the young people who were kind of misguided, that he'll swing by their house and ask their parents, hey, how are they doing? The stories that people would never really know about him as a person are the things that I get to hear. So God, I'm thankful for who he was and for what he's done, and I pray your blessing on him over the next season. But God, my second prayer is for our nation. Lord, I really think that if there's ever been a time in history we need to see things different, it's now. So like John said, would you help us to develop a perspective to see life from somebody else's eyes? Because it's really, really easy to sit in a seat and get angry. It's really, really easy to be in a place where you're upset or you're judgmental. But Lord, would you really help us to see what's really going on? And would you help us be able to cross the lines that we really need to cross in order to reach people and build a stronger community, a stronger world. And God, above all things, we want you to know we love you. God, I thank you for Jesus and for the time we got to talk today. We love you so much. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I count on one thing: if this ain't God who never fails, will not fail me now. You won't fail me now. And in the waiting, if this ain't God who's never late, is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy. All my days yes, I will.
I count on one thing. The same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out.
Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy, but my heart is heavy in all my days. Yes, I will.
My days, yes, I will.
And I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of our name. Nothing can stand against. And I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of our name. Nothing can stand against. And I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of our names. Nothing can stand against. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy in all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will. Oh, oh, oh.
Every week at Velocity, we celebrate something called communion. And what we do is we pass out two different elements. We take the bread and the cup. And it doesn't have to be a bread or a cup, as long as it's something to eat and something to drink. And it's so easy when you do something consistently for it to become routine and mundane. And sometimes it may be easy for us just to go through the motions of communion. But I want to encourage everyone to reflect today about what it truly costs for Jesus' blood to cover us. See, in 1 Peter 3:18, it says this: it cost God plenty to get you out of that empty-handed life you grew up in. He paid with Christ's sacred blood. God always knew He was going to do this for you. How amazing is that? See, God knew all along that He was going to send His Son Jesus to take up our sin and shame, so we don't have to live with that weight or carry that anymore. So let's celebrate the freedom that we have in Jesus as we take communion this morning.
and I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough, until you came along, put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. And now I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn graves into gardens, you turn bones into armies, you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Come on, we sing that out one more time. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you.
Hi everyone, thanks again for joining us this Sunday morning. There's a few things going on throughout the week that I just want to remind you of. Smash Online is meeting today at 2 p.m. on our Velocity Cleveland YouTube channel. If you're a student in 6th through 12th grade, Smash is a great place for you to explore your faith and take steps towards God. For our younger kids, we would love for you to check out our website at velocitycleveland.com/KidCity. Every week, we post new lessons, songs, and crafts for toddlers, preschoolers, and elementary-aged kids. And if you're not sure of how to talk to your kids about God's love, this is a great place for you to start. And last, we would love for you to join us as we continue our weekly online Bible study with Scott and Vanessa. We just started walking through the book of Mark, and this is a great book if you want to learn more about Jesus and what he did while he was on earth. You can find this on the Velocity Cleveland Facebook page every Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Have a great week, everyone. We're so looking forward to seeing you again soon.